Caleb McGraw knew something was wrong the moment the horse came out of the dust. It was late afternoon, that dangerous hour when the sun hung low and long shadows stretched across the Texas panhandle like reaching hands. Caleb stood on his porch with a coffee cup gone cold, his rifle leaning against the doorframe out of habit more than fear. Dry Creek lay quiet around him, too quiet. Then he saw the rider. The horse was lathered, sides heaving, the kind of sweat that came from being pushed hard and without mercy. The woman in the saddle sat straight despite exhaustion, one hand loose on the reins, the other resting near the gun at her hip. She rode like someone who expected trouble, not like someone coming home. Caleb's pulse tightened. He didn't move. He'd learned a long time ago that sudden motion invited sudden death. The rider slowed as she reached a cabin, dust curling around her boots. She swung down with a stiffness that suggested pain she didn't intend to show. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Wind rattled the loose boards under the porch. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried. "You Caleb McGraw?" she asked. Her voice was calm, too calm. "That depends who's asking," Caleb said. She studied him, sharp green eyes taking in the rifle, the worn porch, the land stretching empty behind him. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a small object, letting it dangle from her fingers. A silver locket. Caleb's chest tightened. He recognized it instantly. He'd mailed it 3 months ago with his last letter, a foolish token of trust sent across states to a woman he'd never met. "Margaret." "Yes," the woman said quietly. "I'm the one you've been waiting for." Something inside Caleb went cold. He took a step closer, slow and careful, eyes fixed on the locket. Margaret had brown hair, he said, and she didn't ride armed. The woman's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. People change. "That's so?" Caleb asked. "Then tell me something only she'd know." She didn't hesitate. "You take your coffee black, but only in the morning. Afternoon you add sugar because your hands start to shake if you don't." Her gaze flicked briefly to his left shoulder. "And you favor that side because of a knife scar you got breaking up a fight in Amarillo." Caleb felt the ground shift under his feet. He'd never written that, never told anyone. Before he could speak again, the woman turned slightly, and the movement caught his eye. A dark stain smeared across the leather of her boot. Fresh, still wet. Blood. Caleb's hand moved toward the rifle without him thinking about it. The woman followed his gaze, glanced down, and wiped her boot against the porch step with casual irritation. "Sorry about that." "That wasn't there in my letters," Caleb said. "No," she agreed, "it wasn't." Silence settled heavy between them. Caleb forced himself to look past her, out toward the open land. The sun was dropping fast now, staining the sky red, and that was when he saw them. 3 riders crested on the far ridge. They were still distant, but moving with purpose. The kind of purpose that didn't belong to travelers or neighbors. Metal glinted in the sunlight. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. "You bring them with you?" he asked. The woman didn't answer right away. Her posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable, like a wolf sensing the closing of a trap. Her hand drifted closer to her gun. "Depends what you mean by bring," she said finally. Caleb swallowed. His nearest neighbor lived 15 miles away. The sheriff might as well have been on the moon. Out here, a man handled his own trouble or didn't handle it at all. "What's your name?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Sadie Delaney." "That ain't Margaret." "No," Sadie said. "It isn't." The riders drew closer. Caleb could make out their hats now, the way they spread slightly, fanning out as they rode. Not friends, not lost. "Then you best start talking," Caleb said. Because those men look like they mean to make a mess of my evening. Sadie exhaled slowly. I never meant for this to land on you. Funny thing, Caleb replied, lifting the rifle into his hands. It already has. The lead rider raised a hand, signaling the others to slow. Even from this distance, Caleb could feel the weight of their attention, like a finger pressing against his spine. Sadie leaned closer, her voice low. They've been following me since Kansas City. What did you do? Caleb asked. She looked at the approaching men, then back at him. I survived. The riders stopped about 100 yards out. One of them cupped his hands around his mouth. Dix, he called, then corrected himself with a grin Caleb could see even from here. Margaret, we know you're there. Caleb's blood chilled. Sadie's eyes hardened. That's not my name, she murmured. What do they want? Caleb asked. Me, she said, and anyone who helps me. Caleb glanced at the open land behind him. He could tell her to leave. Tell her to take her trouble and ride hard. That was the sensible choice. The safe one. But the riders were already here, and something in Sadie's stance told him she wouldn't make it far. Caleb stepped off the porch and planted his boots in the dirt beside her. This is my land, he called out. You're trespassing. The lead rider laughed. Didn't know the ground had started talking back. Caleb leveled the rifle. You heard me. Sadie looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. You don't know what you're stepping into. He kept his eyes on the men. I know armed riders don't come knocking polite, that's enough. The lead rider's smile widened, sharp as broken glass. Hand her over, cowboy. We'll be gone before supper. Caleb felt something settle in his chest, heavy and solid. A line drawn. She stays, he said. Sadie closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, there was something like gratitude there, or regret. Maybe both. The riders began to dismount. Caleb tightened his grip on the rifle and realized, with a clarity that made his hand steady, that the woman standing beside him hadn't come for shelter. She had come with a storm at her back, and now that storm was his. Caleb tightened his grip on the rifle and understood the truth all at once. The woman on his porch wasn't asking for protection. She was bringing a war. Gunfire shattered the silence just as the last rider swung down from his horse. Caleb fired first, a clean shot that kicked up dirt near the lead man's boots. A warning, but the warning was not taken. They came forward anyway, weapons drawn, moving fast for men who claimed to only want to talk. Sadie was already diving for cover behind the water trough, drawing her revolver mid-roll and returning fire without hesitation. The crack of her shot dropped one man to a knee. Caleb ducked beside the corner of his cabin, heart pounding but hands steady. He counted 2 left standing and 1 still moving, barely. Whoever this woman was, she wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter. Trained or born into it, he couldn't tell, but she moved like someone who'd faced worse odds and lived. A second rider broke left, trying to flank. Caleb stepped out, sighted, and squeezed the trigger. The man dropped his weapon before he hit the ground. The third, the leader, snarled and turned his horse sharply, riding back toward the ridge at full gallop. Sadie fired once, the bullet grazing his shoulder, but not enough to stop him. He disappeared into the trees, cursing into the wind. Then silence. Only the wind and the soft groan of the wounded man remained. Caleb exhaled, the tightness in his chest and knees. Sadie stood, breathing hard, eyes scanning the tree line. That was Royce Danner, she said, voice low. You know him? Caleb asked. I used to, she replied, holstering her weapon, until I stopped taking orders. He stepped toward her. You want to tell me what's going on? Because I just killed a man in my front yard for a stranger who walked in wearing someone else's name. Sadie turned to face him fully, dirt smeared across her cheek, blood drying on her boot. Her expression softened, just for a second. Then it steeled again. You were supposed to meet Margaret. Caleb nodded slowly. And you're not her. No, Margaret's dead. The words dropped between them like a stone in a still pond. Caleb said nothing for a long moment. You gonna tell me how? Sadie looked away, toward the horizon where Royce had disappeared. 3 days ago. They caught her in Silver Pass, thought she might be able to lead them to me. When she wouldn't talk, they killed her, left her in the dirt. I was too late to stop it, but I buried her. She deserved better. He felt the bottom fall out of his stomach. Margaret, the woman he'd written letters to, imagined mornings with, dreamed of as a quiet voice in a quiet house. Gone. They used her letters, Sadie said, tracked the postmarks, followed every clue until it led them here. I took her place because I thought if they believed I was her, I could pull them away from the innocent. I didn't count on finding someone willing to stand their ground. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. His voice was tight when he spoke. So what are they after, Sadie? You steal something from them? Information, she said. Proof. Royce and his men are running stolen cattle through 3 states, then blaming the thefts on Comanche raids. They pocket the profits and stir up fear so the army pays them to secure the borders, double-dipping on blood and lies. You have proof of this? I did. She patted her coat. Still do. Letters, receipts, signatures for men with stars on their chests. Caleb exhaled hard. That's why they're chasing you. And now, Sadie said quietly, they're chasing you too. A crunch of hooves drew their attention. Caleb raised his rifle again, but stopped when he saw the badges. 5 riders, dust-covered, tense but official. Leading them was a lean, weathered man with gray in his beard and tired eyes that had seen too much. He pulled up, dismounted, and tipped his hat. McGraw? The man asked. Caleb nodded. Name's Brooks. Jedediah Brooks, U.S. Marshal. We've been tracking Royce Danner since Kansas City. Word was he might come through here. He turned his gaze to Sadie. Miss Delaney. You're a hard woman to find. Sadie didn't smile. I wasn't trying to be found. Not until it mattered. Brooks glanced at the body in the dirt, then toward the hills. He'll double back. I know, Sadie said, and he won't be alone next time. Brooks turned to Caleb. You stepped into a pit, friend. You didn't ask for it, but you're in it now. Caleb didn't argue. He looked out at the ridge, where the sun was bleeding into the dust. What happens next? He asked. Next, Brooks said. We set up, because Royce ain't the kind to run far, and when he comes back, he won't be looking for a talk. Sadie stepped closer to Caleb. I didn't want this for you. Caleb shook his head. You think I didn't have trouble before you showed up? I just didn't know what kind. She looked at him, really looked. Then she said, You had a choice today, Caleb. You could have walked away. He met her eyes. So could you? They stood there in silence for a beat. Then Caleb looked over at Brooks. Where do you want us? The marshal raised a brow. You're staying? Caleb gave a tired smile. Can't very well let a woman with blood on her boots do all the fighting. Sadie smirked faintly, the first sign of warmth since she'd arrived. You've got no idea what kind of mess I carry. No, Caleb said, but I reckon I'm about to find out. The wind picked up again, blowing dust over the cabin and the trail beyond. Caleb watched the horizon for movement, knowing Royce Danner was still out there, somewhere close, somewhere angry. He wasn't afraid, not yet. But he understood now. This wasn't just about land or cattle or even Margaret. It was about truth, about who you chose to be when the storm came. As the dust settled, Sadie whispered, "This isn't over. The worst ones always run." The body was gone by morning. Marshal Brooks and his men had buried the dead man behind the barn just before sunrise, wrapped in a tarp and marked with a simple wooden cross. No name, no ceremony, just dirt, silence, and a grim understanding that more graves might be needed before this was over. Caleb watched from the porch, arms crossed, jaw tight. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every creak of the wind, every hoofbeat in the distance had sent his hand twitching toward the rifle beside the bed. Sadie hadn't slept either. She'd sat at the kitchen table all night, cleaning her revolver in pieces, her eyes far away. She hadn't said a word, not even when Caleb brought her coffee. Now she stood near the fence line with Brooks, the morning sun casting long shadows behind her. Caleb stepped down from the porch and joined them, just as Brooks handed her a folded map. "We've traced the herd movements as far south as Palo Duro Canyon," Brooks said. "Royce's boys have been driving stolen cattle through there for months, blaming every last one on Comanche raids." Sadie nodded. "They've been feeding fear to the newspapers, stoking tension on the border. More panic means more Army contracts, and those contracts line the pockets of every dirty man in this operation." "And you've got proof of that?" Caleb asked. Sadie reached into her coat and pulled out a leather packet wrapped tight with twine. She handed it to him. Inside were copies of ledgers, receipts with forged tribal signatures, and signed orders from military contractors, some bearing stamps from officers Caleb recognized from newspapers. "Hell," he muttered. "They've killed to keep this hidden," Sadie said. "They'll kill again." Brooks nodded grimly. "And now they've got a reason to come back here." Caleb's mouth went dry. "Because of me." "Because of her," Sadie said. "But you stood with me. That makes you a loose end." Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. "I got neighbors, ranchers with families. They don't even know what's coming." "Then it's time they did," said a new voice behind them. They turned. Old Man Hobbs stood leaning against the gate. His long white beard tugged sideways by the wind. He wore an old Union jacket and carried a shotgun that looked just as worn as he did. "I heard shooting last night," Hobbs said. "Didn't come right away. Figured if you were dead, no rush. But if you're alive, well, that's a different matter." "Hobbs," Caleb said, half exasperated, half relieved. "How the hell'd you sneak up on us?" "Your land's flat as a pancake. I walked." He looked to Sadie, then Brooks. "That your trouble?" Sadie raised a brow. "You could say that." Hobbs spat into the dirt. "Used to be men brought whiskey or grain when they visited. Now it's outlaws and federal messes. I ain't sure that's an upgrade." Despite herself, Sadie cracked the faintest smile. Hobbs turned serious. "You listen here, McGraw. I've seen this before. Men like Royce Danner? They don't stop till they're buried or they bury you. I had friends tried standing between those types and what they wanted. I had friends. Now I got ghosts." Caleb nodded. "I know. Then start thinking like a man with everything to lose." With that, Hobbs turned and walked back toward the trail. He didn't wait for a reply. He never did. That night, Caleb stood on the porch with Sadie. The sky was wide and black. Stars scattered like spilled salt. "You got family?" he asked her. She took a long time to answer. Had. He waited. "My father was a sheriff. Real law and order man. Believed in justice, even when it got inconvenient. He found out about a railroad scam. Politicians and cattle barons bleeding the territory dry. Tried to expose it. Caleb already knew the end of the story. They made it look like a robbery. My mother, my little brother, all gone. Just me left. She didn't cry. She said it like a scar she'd touched too many times to feel anymore. I disappeared, took a new name, spent years following paper trails, hiding in towns, pretending to be someone else just to stay alive. And now you're here, Caleb said quietly. Sadie nodded. And now I'm tired. Behind them, the screen door creaked open. Ellie, barefoot and bleary-eyed, stepped out holding her blanket like a shield. I heard voices, she mumbled. Caleb crouched. Sorry, Bug, we didn't mean to wake you. Ellie rubbed her eyes. Is she gonna stay? Caleb looked at Sadie. That's not up to me. Sadie crouched to Ellie's level. I'd like to, if that's okay with you. Ellie nodded. You shoot real good. Sadie smiled. Thanks. Then Ellie said something that knocked the wind out of both of them. If the bad men come back, will you leave? Caleb opened his mouth, but Sadie beat him to it. No, sweetheart, she said. I won't. Ellie nodded and went back inside. Sadie stared at the door for a moment, then looked at Caleb. That's what kills me, she whispered. It's not the fighting. It's the thought of what happens if I lose. If I let someone like her down. You won't, Caleb said. Not while I'm breathing. The next morning, a rock came through the kitchen window. Shattered glass exploded across the floor, landing in Sadie's coffee. Attached was a piece of paper, crudely folded, tied with a red ribbon. Caleb picked it up, careful of shards, unfolded it, read. His stomach turned to stone. He read it aloud. The woman for our freedom. Sunrise at Devil's Rock. Come alone, or we start killing ranchers until you do. Sadie stood silent. Caleb looked at her. Devil's Rock? Natural outcropping 5 miles north, she said. Steep cliffs, one entrance, plenty of cover. Sounds like a trap. It is a trap. Marshal Brooks walked in, rifle in hand. What's the play? Caleb looked out the broken window. They think they know this land better than I do. Sadie raised an eyebrow. Do they? He turned toward her. Let's prove 'em wrong. Caleb folded the note slowly, and knew the threat wasn't aimed at Sadie anymore. It was aimed at everyone he loved. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, elbows on the worn wood, eyes locked on the note. Sunrise, Devil's Rock, alone. It was written like a trade, but it wasn't. He'd seen enough ambushes in his time to know better. That place, all those ridges, those blind spots. It was a death trap. Whoever wrote the note had no intention of honoring a deal. They just wanted Sadie back in their hands, and they'd spill blood to get her. Sadie stood at the sink, silent, hands wrapped around her coffee mug like she needed the heat to keep from shaking. She hadn't said much since they found the note. Caleb could feel the war going on inside her. Fight or run. Burn it all down or walk away before more innocents got hurt. You ever been to Devil's Rock? He asked, finally breaking the silence. She didn't look at him. Once. A long time ago. It's the kind of place men go when they don't expect to walk back. Caleb leaned back in his chair. That's why they picked it. Brooks walked in from the front porch, rifle slung, eyes hard. We got less than 20 hours. If they're bluffing, they're doing a hell of a job. They're not bluffing, Sadie said quietly. Parker and Voss were the worst of the bunch. They enjoyed it. Caleb looked up. You've seen them do this before. She nodded once. I saw Parker burn a ranch to the ground with a family still inside. Claimed they were harboring me. Voss, well, he smiles too much. You never want to see a man smile when he's cutting someone loose from their saddle. Brooks swore under his breath, and stepped outside again. Silence fell between them. Caleb didn't speak. He just studied her. The set of her shoulders, the way her jaw tensed. She was trying to hold everything in, trying to stay still. But steel bends eventually. "Sadie," he said, "you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Her voice cut clean through the air. "I brought this here," she said, turning to him, eyes blazing. "Those men only know your name because of me. They only threaten your neighbors because they couldn't find me. I can't let that spread. I won't." Caleb stood. "Then let's fight smart. Devil's Rock is a trap. But there's a trail through Dry Creek, barely wide enough for a horse. It bends behind the ridge. I used to hunt there. If we move before dawn, we can come in behind them. Maybe even turn the trap around." Sadie's eyes searched his. "You're serious?" "I'm not letting them take you," he said, "and I'm sure as hell not handing you over." She took a breath, nodded, then sat down across from him. "You want to know the worst part?" she said after a long pause. "It's not that they're hunting me. It's that they're good at it. Too good." Caleb frowned. "What do you mean?" "Parker and Voss weren't just muscle. They were trackers. Real ones. They can pick up a scent from 3 days out and follow it through brush, snow, whatever. They were part of the old scout units before they got discharged for being too violent." Caleb rubbed his jaw, "which means if they slip away from Devil's Rock, they'll come back with more, and they won't bother with notes next time." Upstairs, a soft creak on the staircase pulled their attention. Ellie peeked down, her eyes wide but her mouth firm. "You're going after them, aren't you?" she asked. Caleb walked over, crouched low so they were eye to eye. "Not if I can help it," he said. "Don't lie." Sadie approached slowly, crouched beside them. "Ellie, we're trying to stop something bad from getting worse." Ellie looked between them. "You think I don't know what's going on? The shooting. The blood on your boot. That man who came last week asking questions about you." Sadie froze. "What man?" Caleb asked. Ellie swallowed. "He came while you were down by the creek, said he was looking for his sister. Had a scar on his neck. He was nice. Too nice." Sadie shot to her feet. "Boss. That was Voss." Caleb's blood ran cold. "He was here," Sadie whispered. "He's already scouted the land. That's why they picked Devil's Rock. They know the approach. They've seen the cabin." Caleb stood, pacing. "This changes everything," he said. "They'll be ready for the trail." Brooks stepped in from outside. "Then we need a different plan." "No," Sadie said, eyes hard again. "We stick with the trail. But I go first." "The hell you do," Caleb snapped. Sadie faced him. "They want me. Let them think they've got me. You take the long route. Come in when it counts." "That's suicide." "It's strategy," she shot back. "We can't beat them in a straight fight, but we can outthink them." Brooks looked between them. "She's right. It's risky, but it's a play." Caleb's fists clenched. "It's not a play I like." "You don't have to," Sadie said. "Just trust me." Caleb turned away, hands braced on the back of the chair. His land, his house, his kid. And this woman, this stranger he'd let in, now stood between it all and the fire coming down the trail. "I know what kind of man you are," Sadie said, softer now. "Margaret's letters painted a picture, not just of a lonely cowboy, but of someone who wanted something real, something decent." Caleb looked back at her. "I needed to believe men like you still existed," she said. He stepped forward. "And I needed to believe there was a woman out there who'd fight for more than just herself." They stood in that silence, the kind where something deeper forms. Sadie turned toward the stairs. "You should get some sleep. We'll need to move before dawn." As she passed, Ellie called out from the hallway, "Sadie?" She turned. "Don't let them take you." Sadie's voice was gentle. "I won't." But when she climbed the stairs and closed the door behind her, Caleb saw it, the slightest falter in her step, the quiet way her hand trembled. He stayed at the window until the sky turned deep indigo and the first birds began to sing. Sadie stared into the dark and said softly, "They want to end this at Devil's Rock, and so do I." The first light of dawn barely cracked over the ridge when the group split ways. Sadie rode east, alone, just as planned, wrapped in Caleb's worn duster. Hat pulled low, her silhouette looked smaller than usual. Almost like the woman she'd pretended to be, quiet, forgettable, harmless. Caleb stood on the edge of the creek trail, watching until she disappeared into the blur of low brush and sandstone shadows. He didn't like it, not for a second, but he knew she was right. They wanted her visible. They wanted to think she'd come alone. Brooks was beside him, checking his rifle one last time. The U.S. Marshal had the look of a man who'd seen too many endings to believe in clean ones. "Trail narrows up ahead," he said. "We'll have to go single file through the rocks." Caleb nodded. They won't be watching the back way, not if they think they've already got what they came for. Brooks gave him a side glance. "Let's hope Sadie sells it long enough for us to come in hot." The two men mounted up, leading 3 more marshals behind them, each one silent, focused. The tension between the hooves and dust was thick enough to taste. The trail wasn't easy. It wound along a dry creek bed, choked with mesquite and sharp rocks that could lame a horse if you weren't watching every step. But Caleb knew it well, had hunted mule deer through there in winters past, had even camped once under the overhang at Widow's Bluff. He never thought he'd ride it to stop a massacre. After an hour of slow progress, the canyon walls began to close in. Devil's Rock rose ahead like a knife out of the earth, towering high and jagged, scarred from time and battles long forgotten. It cast a shadow over the land like it was daring anyone to come closer. Caleb pulled his horse to a stop and signaled the others down. Time to go the rest on foot. They dismounted in silence, tying reins to low branches. Brooks crept ahead, rifle drawn. Caleb followed, eyes scanning for signs, tracks, campfire smoke, anything. Then Brooks froze. Caleb saw it too. A boot print. Fresh. Deep. Too deep to be Sadie's. The marshals fanned out, weapons raised. Brooks pointed to a slope of broken shale that curved around the far side of the rock. "They're watching the front, just like we figured," Caleb whispered, "and Sadie's walking right into them." Brooks' jaw clenched. She knows what she's doing. But Caleb wasn't so sure anymore. They circled quietly, pressing through the underbrush until they found a rise that gave them a clean view of the basin below. Devil's Rock loomed above Sadie, who had just reached the open ground. She rode slowly, back straight, head high. And then came the voices. "Hold it right there." 3 men stepped out from behind scattered boulders. 2 of them Caleb didn't recognize, younger, eager, the kind who didn't think twice before pulling a trigger. But the third man, the one with the crooked grin and scar down his jaw, was Clay Parker. Caleb gritted his teeth. He remembered Parker well. He'd worked a neighboring ranch 2 years back. Seemed like a decent hand, until one night he vanished with 3 horses and a payroll bag. No one had seen him since. Until now. Sadie dismounted, slowly, deliberately. She didn't reach for her weapon. Parker approached, gun drawn. "You're a hard woman to catch, Delaney." "I'm not running anymore," Sadie replied, Her voice carried across the open air, steady as stone. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to make a choice," she said. "You let me walk out of here, and maybe you keep breathing." Parker laughed. "You think I'm scared of you?" Sadie smiled, small and knowing. "You should be." That's when everything went wrong. One of the younger men spotted movement on the ridge. He shouted, "Too late." Brooks gave the order. Gunfire erupted like thunder. Caleb sprang into action, sliding down the rocky slope, rifle at the ready. The first marshal beside him dropped a man with one shot. The other marshal took cover behind a rock and laid down fire across the clearing. Sadie dove to the ground, rolled behind a flat slab of stone, and finally drew her revolver. The air cracked with bullets. Parker ran for the horses, firing wildly over his shoulder. Caleb pursued. "Parker!" he shouted. The man turned, panicked, tried to mount, but Caleb's shot hit him square in the leg. He fell hard, clutching his thigh, shrieking curses. But he wasn't done. As Caleb approached, Parker drew a pistol with his other hand. A flash, a shot. Dust exploded beside Caleb's head. Then a second shot, not Caleb's. Parker's eyes widened. Blood bloomed from his chest like ink and water. He fell back, dead before he hit the dirt. Caleb turned. Sadie stood a few yards away, gun still smoking, her face pale, her hand steady. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Sadie collapsed. Caleb rushed to her, dropping to his knees. Blood soaked her side, seeping fast. "Damn it," he whispered. "You weren't supposed to be the bait and the one bleeding." Sadie gritted her teeth. "I told you. I make my own plays." He ripped off his scarf and pressed it hard against the wound. She winced but didn't cry out. Brooks ran up, shouting orders behind them, securing the scene, chasing down the last man who'd fled. "You gonna be okay?" Caleb said, breath shaking. Sadie blinked slowly. "Don't lie." "I'm not." "You are," she said. "But I appreciate it." He held pressure, cursing the blood that wouldn't stop. "Why'd you jump in front of me like that?" She gave a weak smile. "Because you stayed, even when I brought hell with me." Caleb's throat tightened. In the distance, the last echoes of gunfire faded, and all that was left was dust, silence, and the weight of what they'd just survived. Voss was still out there, and he was the kind of man who didn't forgive or forget. Voss didn't die at Devil's Rock, and Sadie wasn't the only one he wanted now. The ride back to the cabin was slower than Caleb wanted. Sadie lay slumped against him in the saddle, her breath shallow but steady. Brooks had patched her side with a field dressing and morphine, but the blood loss had left her pale and quiet. She didn't speak much, didn't have to. Caleb could feel her weight against him, all that strength and fight now folded in on itself, but still alive. That was enough. Marshal Brooks rode ahead with two of his men, scouting the road back to Dry Creek. The rest remained behind at Devil's Rock to bury Parker and sweep the area for any sign of Voss. They found nothing. Just spent rounds, hoof tracks, and the uneasy sense that the one man who should be dead had vanished into the dust. Voss didn't die at Devil's Rock, and now Caleb knew what that meant. They were far from safe. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was hanging low, casting long orange shadows across the porch. Ellie ran out the moment she saw them, barefoot and wide-eyed. "Is she?" "She's hurt but alive," Caleb said, sliding off the saddle with Sadie in his arms. Ellie opened the door, held it like it mattered. Caleb laid Sadie down on his bed, his hands already working to unwrap the field bandage. "Get clean water, rags. And that bottle of rye under the sink." Ellie dashed off, no hesitation. Sadie stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "You really do keep Rye under the sink," she murmured. Caleb gave a tight smile. "I never lie about liquor." He cleaned the wound gently, washed away blood that had already begun to dry around the edges. The bullet had passed clean through, missed anything vital. She was lucky, or stubborn enough to survive anything. "I told you not to play bait and hero," he muttered. Sadie winced as he tightened the bandage. "I never said I'd listen." Ellie came back, arms full. Caleb poured rye over the wound and Sadie bit down on a rolled towel. The room filled with the sharp bite of whiskey and the silence of grit. "You're not gonna die," Caleb said when it was done, sitting beside her. "Not today." "Disappointed?" she teased, voice thin. "Hell no." She reached out, fingers brushing his arm. "You didn't have to come for me. You could have walked away." "I tried," he said softly. "Didn't work." Her eyes met his, something in them softer now, less guarded. Outside, boots scraped across the porch. Brooks stepped in, hat in hand. "We got a problem," he said. Caleb stood, instantly alert. "Tracks," Brooks continued. "2 horses left Devil's Rock. We thought they were ours, but they weren't. One set loops back. Comes here." Caleb's blood ran cold. "He's coming." Brooks nodded. "Tonight. Maybe now. Boss wants to finish it." Sadie tried to sit up, groaning with the effort. "Then we finish it first." "No," Caleb said, pushing her gently back. "You're not moving." "Caleb." "I mean it. You've done enough. You took a bullet, ended Parker, and brought half their operation to its knees. Now it's our turn." Sadie glared at him, but didn't resist. Brooks pulled out a map, laid it on the table. "He'll try to get close. He knows the land, the layout. Maybe even the kid." Ellie stood near the window, listening silent. Caleb looked at her. "You remember what I taught you?" She nodded. He knelt beside her. "This isn't a game, Elle. If you see a man with a scar down his neck, run. You get to Hobbs' place, don't look back." "I won't run," Ellie said, trembling but firm. "You will," Caleb said, gripping her shoulders. "Because this ain't your fight." Brooks placed a rifle by the window, another near the back door. "We'll hold the line. He'll come sneaking, not charging. Voss always liked to watch first." Caleb lit every lantern in the house, casting long shadows through the windows. Then he turned them all off. "Let's make him think we're asleep." They waited. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of wood and the distant rustle of night wind. Every sound felt louder in the dark. The shift of boots, the breath in their chests, the tick of a clock that hadn't worked in years. Then came the crunch. Outside. Porch step. Brooks gave a slow nod. Caleb moved toward the back. A flicker of movement, a shadow near the side window. Caleb raised his rifle, slow and steady. But before he could fire, glass shattered. A rock crashed through the back window, landing in the middle of the kitchen. Attached was a note. Brooks grabbed it, flashlight flicking over the words. His face hardened. "What does it say?" Sadie asked from the bed. Caleb read aloud, voice low. "No trade. No tricks. Sunrise. Just you and her. Devil's Rock again. This time, no second chances." Silence. Sadie whispered, "He wants to end it where it started." Caleb stepped to the window, staring into the black. "He doesn't want a deal. He wants a show." Brooks folded the paper. "He's daring us." Sadie sat up with effort. "Then we take the dare." "No," Caleb said again. "We're not playing by his rules." Ellie crept closer. "What if he doesn't wait for sunrise?" Caleb didn't answer. "Because that's what scared him most." They were in the middle of nowhere. Voss knew the terrain, and he had nothing left to lose. Sadie laid back, eyes on the ceiling. If we don't go, he'll come anyway. Caleb stood in the center of the room, fists clenched. The man had haunted their land, their sleep, their lives, and now he was calling them back to the place where blood had already been spilled. "You don't have to do this," he told her. "Yes," she said, "I do." He looked at Brooks. The marshal gave a grim nod. "We'll hit Devil's Rock again," Brooks said. "But this time we do it on our terms." Caleb checked the windows once more, then turned off the final lantern. Night fell hard and full. They would ride before dawn. Sadie swung into the saddle and rode into the dark, knowing if she didn't finish this, it would never end. They rode before the sun. Caleb led the way down the narrow game trail along Dry Creek, the hooves of the horses muffled by soft earth and pine needles. The air was cold enough to bite through denim, but no one complained. They moved in silence. 5 riders, tense and grim, eyes forward, rifles ready. Brooks rode beside Caleb, scanning the ridgeline. "You sure about this approach?" "I've hunted through here since I was 19, Caleb said. "They're expecting us from the front again. We'll come around the ridge and drop in behind them." Sadie was behind them, still pale, her side wrapped tight under Caleb's old coat. She shouldn't have been riding, let alone heading into a second fight at Devil's Rock. But no one could stop her. Not now. Not after everything Voss had done. She was riding for justice, or for closure. Caleb wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. They reached the final bend just as the horizon began to glow faintly with pre-dawn light. Devil's Rock loomed ahead, dark and sharp against the sky, its silhouette cut into the morning like a warning. Caleb signaled for the others to dismount. They tied their horses low in the brush, then moved up the incline on foot, weaving between the scrub and sandstone outcroppings. From the overlook above the basin, Caleb crouched low and peered through his spyglass. There he was, Emmett Boss, standing alone in the open space below, right where Parker had died days earlier, rifle across his chest, hat low, calm as ever. He wasn't hiding, he wanted to be seen. "Where are the others?" Brooks whispered. "You think he brought backup?" "He's too proud," Sadie said. "He thinks he can end it himself." Caleb studied the angles. "He's standing out in the open, but there's cover behind those rocks. Too convenient." "Trap," Brooks muttered. "Of course," Sadie said. "I'll go down," Caleb said. "He wants to talk? I'll give him 10 seconds to surrender." "No," Sadie said, laying a hand on his arm. "This ends with me." Caleb turned to her. "You're still bleeding." She stared down the ridge. "I'm still breathing, too." He didn't argue. Not anymore. Some fights couldn't be taken away from the person who earned them. Brooks handed her a rifle. "If it goes sideways, we're coming in hot." Sadie nodded once. She stepped down the ridge, slow and deliberate, boots crunching softly against loose stone. The moment she cleared the brush and entered the basin, Voss looked up. He didn't raise his weapon, just tipped his head slightly. "Well, damn," he called out. "Thought maybe you'd send the cowboy instead." "I figured you'd want to see my face when this ended," Sadie replied. Voss chuckled. "You always had a flair for dramatic exits. And you always liked killing people who couldn't shoot back." His grin faded. "You've been busy, Sadie. Messed up a lot of good money. Got decent men locked up. That doesn't sit right." Neither did Margaret's body rotting under a cottonwood tree. Voss spat. "Collateral. She got in the way. She wrote letters. That's all she did. You're the one who dragged her into this." Sadie lifted the rifle just a hair. You came for her. You chose to kill her. You think you're some kind of hero now? Voss sneered. You're not. You're just broken. Sadie didn't flinch. Maybe, but broken doesn't mean beaten. He laughed again, but there was a tremble in it this time. So what now? You shoot me? Ride off with your cowboy into the sunrise? No, she said. I give you one chance. Voss raised an eyebrow. To what? Drop my gun and walk? To live. He stared at her. The wind picked up, swirling dust between them. Then he said, You ever think maybe I'm tired of running? Sadie's finger moved toward the trigger. Or maybe, Voss said, eyes narrowing, I just wanted to get close enough to take you with me. He moved fast. Too fast. The pistol in his coat came up as he stepped forward. Sadie fired first. The shot slammed into Voss's chest, spinning him sideways. But even as he stumbled, he managed to fire back, the bullet slicing through Sadie's left arm. She fell to one knee, gritting her teeth. Voss collapsed a few feet away, coughing, blood bubbling at his lips. You, he gasped. You always were a damn ghost. Sadie walked to him, cradling her wounded arm. She looked down. You should have stayed dead, Emmett. Then she put one final round into his heart. The echo of the gunshot rolled through the canyon, and then silence. Caleb came running moments later, Brooks right behind him. Sadie turned to face them, blood soaking through her bandage, hair stuck to her face with sweat and dirt. It's over, she said. Caleb caught her before she fell. He lowered her gently to the ground, held her against his chest. You did it, he said, voice cracking. You ended it. She gave him a tired, crooked smile. Told you I made my own plays. Brooks knelt beside them, checked Voss's body, then nodded. It's done, he said. The sky above them was turning gold. And finally, the war that had haunted Sadie across half the country lay quiet in the dust. Bleeding against his chest, Sadie whispered, You stayed, even when I brought hell with me. 3 weeks later, the blood was gone, from the cabin floor, from the porch, even from the dirt around Devil's Rock. The scars remained, but the stains had faded. The land had a way of reclaiming itself. Caleb stood on the porch, leaning against the post, watching the horizon as morning light rolled over the hills. In the soft gold of dawn, Dry Creek looked like it always had, wide, quiet, and untouched. But he knew better. Everything had changed. Inside, the faint clatter of dishes and the smell of coffee drifted through the open door. Ellie was up early, already working in the garden Sadie had insisted on planting behind the barn. Not just flowers, beans, squash, tomatoes, things meant to grow. Things meant to stay. Sadie had healed slower this time. 2 bullets in less than a week took a toll even on her. But she was moving again, stubborn as ever. She wore her sling like a badge, said it kept her from trying to lift things she shouldn't. Caleb heard the door creak open behind him. She stepped onto the porch barefoot, hair still damp from washing, her loose shirt tucked into old jeans that had seen better years. But to him, she'd never looked more like herself, not the version she carried from town to town. The outlaw, the ghost, the threat. Just Sadie. You're brooding again, she said, sipping from her mug. Not brooding, Caleb replied. Just thinking. Same thing. They stood side by side, watching the wind ripple through the grass. I got a letter yesterday, she said. He looked over. Marshal Brooks? She nodded. Wants me to join full-time. Territorial investigations, pays steady, work's important. Caleb kept his face neutral. And 3 months ago I would have said yes without thinking. She looked out at the fence line where Ellie was pulling weeds with more determination than skill. But now, she said. Caleb waited. I didn't know I was tired until I stopped running. I didn't know what peace felt like until I woke up without a loaded pistol under my pillow. Caleb smiled faintly. You sure it's peace? You've been arguing with the hens every morning. They started it. He chuckled, then turned serious. You still got a fight in you, just doesn't have to be the same one. Sadie sipped her coffee, then looked at him with something soft in her eyes. Exactly. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then she said, Margaret's letters, they weren't just about hope. They were about you. The kind of man who tries to build something honest in a crooked world. Caleb shifted, a little uncomfortable. I was just looking for someone to talk to. And you got me, she said, smirking. Sorry about that. I'm not. Sadie set her cup down and stepped close, placing her hand on his chest. I want to stay, she said, if you'll have me. Caleb looked down at her, really looked. And in that moment, every scar and hard-won truth between them felt like something earned, not something to hide. I already do. He kissed her then, not with urgency but with quiet certainty. The kind that didn't need fireworks to mean everything. Ellie's voice called out from the garden. Chickens are out again. Sadie groaned. That one with the crooked leg hates me. Caleb laughed. You shot near the co-op to scare off a fox. She's still traumatized. Sadie turned to head down the porch steps, muttering, Foxes I can handle. Chickens are another beast. Caleb watched her go, heart full. Later that week, they held a small gathering, just neighbors, the marshals who'd helped, and old man Hobbs, who arrived with a jug of apple brandy and his shotgun, just in case someone got ideas. They didn't call it a wedding, but it might as well have been. No white dress, no preacher. Just two people standing in the middle of a circle of friends, saying without ceremony, this is it. You, me, here, now. Sadie kept Caleb's name in his land, but she also kept her grit. Over time, she helped start a women's refuge on the edge of the territory. A safe place for those escaping the kind of pasts no one liked to talk about. People came. People healed. Ellie grew into her own fire, tough, brave, with more aim than most grown men. She called Sadie family before she ever called her ma'am. Caleb repaired the section of fence near the creek that'd been down since spring. They finished the garden. Put a swing up in the big cottonwood out front. There were no more shootouts, no more notes tied to rocks. Just quiet mornings, hard work, and love that didn't have to be spoken every day to be real. Because in the end, home wasn't a place Sadie had found. It was a choice she'd made. To stop running. To trust again. To stay. And Caleb? He never got the bride he ordered through the mail. What he got instead was a woman who chose him fully, knowing the worst of him and staying anyway. A partner, not a promise. A firebrand with a wounded heart and a backbone made of steel. Someone who didn't just survive hell. She came back and planted a garden in it. And that was more than he'd ever hoped for. Some fights are worth walking away from, but some people are worth staying for.